I am currently having some limiting issues with this device and I will be considering the M2 Macbook Pro. I'm going to tell you what you need to know about the M1 Macbook Pro and if you need to consider the M2 Macbook Pro in your current situation. The number of ports on this device is only 3 USB-C, 2 on the left and 1 on the right. The new M2 MacBook Pro has the same number of ports as the M1 MacBook Pro. My experience with the M1 MacBook Pro, the number of ports is great, but I would have preferred to have 2 on each side, 2 USB-C on the right and 2 USB-C on the left. I am using this small USB-C hub to have even more accessories connected to this MacBook Pro. This one is not really expensive, and if you're seriously working on this device, you will need this type of accessory. So the next thing that I purchased because of this MacBook Pro M1 was this SanDisk Portable Extreme SSD. This SSD is the key to my workflow. I use this SSD to store my videos and do the exporting of those also inside this SSD. I also have stored inside this SSD a lot of documents and CAD files. I am also using this SSD for 2D and 3D CAD rendering, and it works well. So at this moment you might be asking yourself, why am I trying to get a new MacBook Pro if everything is good, everything is working like I want it to work? Or even why you should consider an M2 MacBook Pro instead of the old M1 that you see on the video. In terms of charging, this device charges really fast and it uses MagSafe for the charging. You can also use USB-C, but using the USB-C will cap the charging rate at 100 watt. This is a screenshot of my activity monitoring. You can see at the bottom I have the memory that is saturated. I have in this MacBook Pro 16 gigs of memory, and as you can see, it is not enough for what I'm doing. The memory is in orange color. It should be green. Green means everything is working good and there is no pressure on the memory. So if I were to get this MacBook Pro again, for sure I will go for the 32 GB of RAM memory. It is going to be the best choice for me because I use a lot of RAM memory while doing the video editing and other CAD or extensive work that use the GPU. So I went with the cheapest version of the 16-inch MacBook Pro, and this is what you get for that one. If you're going to do video editing, it can work very well. In the long run, 16 gigs is not going to be enough. So I think a lot of people with the same configuration of MacBook Pro, 16 gigs of RAM and 1 terabyte are going to consider the M2 MacBook Pro, but only with the 32 gigs of RAM. This is going to be the best choice for me going forward because this M1 MacBook Pro with 16 gigs is already struggling. If you're coming from anything less than 16 gigs of RAM on a MacBook Pro, you can go with the M1 MacBook Pro 16 gigs. It is going to be very well equipped for everything that you're going to do. The other issue that I had with this MacBook Pro was the memory. I went with 1 terabyte of memory. 1 terabyte is not bad. It is good enough for the average person. And as you just saw it, you will need some external hard drive if you get 1 terabyte of memory or 500 gigs of memory. So I suggest you get 1 terabyte of memory and spend the extra money getting some external hard drive. I have 2 external hard drive. One is fast and the other one is slow. The slowest that I have has 5 terabyte of memory and the fastest has only 2 terabyte of memory. So currently, while I'm working on the M1 MacBook Pro in the Final Cut Pro, sometimes the application freezes and I cannot do anything. So this is the situation that I am having right now with this M1 MacBook Pro 16 gigs of RAM. The issue does not prevent me from doing my work, but it simply slows me down a little bit. As you can see, it is really quick when everything is working. For me, the only thing that my MacBook Pro is missing is only a 32 gigs of RAM. Everything else is working super fast. The CPU is super fast, and on the M2 MacBook Pro, it is even more faster. The problem with what I just said is if you want a 32 gigs of RAM, you're going to need a M1 Max chip. Apple has made the selection in a way where you need to upgrade to the higher, more powerful chip in order to get the 32 gigs of RAM. So this was something that I didn't want to do, but as things are now, I'm willing to do the Max chip and the 32 gigs of RAM. So do I need the new M2 chip? Probably no. I just need 32 gigs of RAM. I can get 32 gigs of RAM by going with the M1 Max chip and getting rid of the computer that I have right now, or I can simply get a new M2 MacBook with the M2 Max chip. The battery life on this device is excellent. You have the super fast charging at 140 watt if you're using the MagSafe. If you use USB-C, you're going to be capped at 100 watt of charging. The charging speed and battery life are going to be approximately the same thing between the M1 and M2. In terms of speed of charging, you can get 100% of your battery after 1 hour and 20 minutes, 20 to 25 minutes. This is using a 140 watt charger. I used 2 different chargers. I did the same test and I got approximately the same result. 1 hour and 24 minutes, the device was 100% fully charged. This is one reason again to not upgrade to the M2, because in terms of battery charging and battery life, they are going to be exactly the same. I think if you have a M1 MacBook Pro with 16-inch or 14-inch, you do not necessarily need to upgrade to the M2 MacBook Pro, because you have already 90% of what the M2 MacBook Pro can do. You're only going to get 10% more efficiency, 10% more speed, and all that. It is better to keep the M1 MacBook Pro. Go for the M3 MacBook Pro. If you're in my situation, you need more RAM, you can go with the M2 32 gigs of RAM or go with the M1 Max with 32 gigs of RAM.